When my husband slapped me at our family gathering for refusing to sign over my tech empire, he thought public humiliation would break me. 3 years later, as he begged for a bailout in my Fortune 500 boardroom, he realized too late exactly who he had tried to destroy. Life has a way of revealing people's true colors in the most spectacular ways. Please share your thoughts in the comment section below. Each of your shares is not only a motivation for us, but also contributes to spreading value to the community. If you find this content useful, don't forget to watch the whole video, like, subscribe, and share with someone you think needs to hear this too. That crisp autumn evening at my in-laws' estate was supposed to be a celebration of family, tradition, and success. The Montgomery family's annual harvest gathering was always an extravagant affair, with the sprawling gardens transformed to a wonderland of twinkling lights, the scent of pumpkin spice and cinnamon hanging in the air, and the sound of classical music drifting through the carefully manicured grounds. I remember adjusting my emerald silk dress, a designer piece that had cost more than my first car, as I watched guests arrive through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the main hall. The dress had been carefully chosen to project the image of success that my husband Marcus always insisted we maintain. Everything in our lives was about image: the right clothes, the right car, the right address. Even our marriage had become more about appearances than substance, though I hadn't fully admitted that to myself yet. My company, Tech Vision Solutions, had just secured its biggest contract to date, a multi-million-dollar deal with a major healthcare provider that would revolutionize patient care systems across the country. It was the kind of success I'd dreamed of since founding the company 6 years ago, the culmination of countless sleepless nights and sacrifices. Marcus had laughed when I first shared my vision of creating innovative healthcare technology solutions. "Stick to what you know, darling," he'd said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Leave the big business decisions to those who understand them." The irony wasn't lost on me that he now couldn't stop talking about our company's success. That evening, I watched him work the room with practiced charm, his perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit and carefully styled salt and pepper hair, making him look every bit the successful executive he portrayed himself to be. He moved from group to group, accepting congratulations for Tech Vision's success as if it were his own achievement, while I stood back observing the subtle dynamics at play. His family had always been like this: old money wrapped in new ambition. The Montgomerys had built their fortune in real estate generations ago, and now each new family member was expected to contribute to the dynasty in their own way. Marcus had been groomed from birth to take over his father's development company, but recent whispers suggested all was not well in the Montgomery empire. I'd noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way he'd been spending more time in his home office, speaking in hushed tones on the phone. "Sarah, darling." My mother-in-law's voice cut through my thoughts. Eleanor Montgomery approached with her usual air of regal authority, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her Hermes scarf artfully draped around her shoulders. "The caterers need your approval on the dessert presentation. Do be a dear and handle that while I greet the Hendersons." It wasn't a request. It never was with Eleanor. Everything was a carefully orchestrated dance of power and control. As I made my way through the growing crowd, I caught snippets of conversation that made my skin prickle. Marcus's cousin Claire, never one to miss an opportunity for drama, was holding court near the grand staircase. "Of course, it's all very impressive," she was saying, her voice carrying just enough to ensure I could hear, "but one has to wonder about the stability of it all. These tech startups can be so volatile." I might have dismissed it as typical family sniping if I hadn't noticed Marcus's father, Richard, watching me with an unusually calculating expression. The Montgomery patriarch rarely paid attention to anything that wasn't directly related to his own interests. Something was off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what. The evening progressed with the usual mixture of subtle power plays and forced pleasantries that characterized Montgomery family gatherings. I was just beginning to think we might make it through the night without incident when Marcus appeared at my side, his hand gripping my elbow with unexpected force. "We need to talk," he murmured, his breath hot against my ear. "Now." He steered me toward his father's study, the one room in the house that had always been off limits to anyone outside the immediate family. As we entered, I noticed Richard and Eleanor were already there, along with Marcus's brother Thomas, who was examining something on the massive mahogany desk with great interest. The heavy door clicked shut behind us, and suddenly the warmth of the autumn evening gave way to a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Something in the air had shifted, and I knew with absolute certainty that whatever was about to happen would change everything. Richard Montgomery's study had always felt like a fortress of masculinity, with its dark wood paneling, leather-bound books, and the overwhelming scent of expensive cigars. That night, it felt more like a trap. The antique Tiffany lamp cast shadows that danced across the faces of my husband's family, turning familiar features into masks of barely concealed hostility. Marcus released my elbow and moved to stand beside his father's desk, adjusting his platinum cufflinks, a nervous habit I'd noticed over our years together. Thomas hadn't looked up from the papers spread before him, but Eleanor had positioned herself near the door, effectively blocking my exit. The choreography of their movements was too perfect to be coincidental. "Sarah," Richard began, his voice carrying that particular tone he reserved for business negotiations, "I think it's time we had a frank discussion about the future of TechVision." He lifted a crystal tumbler of scotch to his lips, the amber liquid catching the lamplight. "The family has concerns." I felt my spine stiffen. "The family?" I kept my voice steady, professional. I wasn't aware the family had any stake in my company. "That's precisely the problem," Eleanor interjected, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against the leather arm of her chair. "This notion of your company has become rather problematic." Thomas finally looked up from his papers, pushing a document across the desk toward me. "We've drawn up a reasonable proposal. Given the current market conditions and considering the family's interests, we believe transferring ownership of TechVision to Montgomery Holdings would be the most prudent course of action." The document before me was a transfer of ownership agreement, already bearing Marcus's signature, my husband, the man who had sworn to stand by my side through everything. Signed away my life's work without a moment's hesitation. "This is absurd," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "TechVision is my company. I built it from nothing. The Montgomery family has no claim to it." Marcus stepped forward, his expression a mixture of condescension and false concern. "Darling, be reasonable. The healthcare industry is volatile. You've had an impressive run, but it's time to let professionals handle things. The family can protect what you've built, expand it properly, protect it." I couldn't help but laugh, though there was no humor in the sound. "You mean strip it for parts to save your failing real estate empire?" The slight flinch in Richard's expression confirmed my suspicion. "That's what this is really about, isn't it? Montgomery Holdings is in trouble, and you want to use my success to bail you out." Eleanor's face hardened. "Mind your tone, Sarah. Remember who welcomed you into this family, gave you the connections that made your little venture possible in the first place." "My tone?" I turned to face her fully. "You mean the tone of someone watching their family try to steal their life's work? Those connections you're so proud of, I never used them. Not once. Every contract, every deal, every success was earned through my own merit." "Merit?" Marcus scoffed, his carefully maintained facade cracking. "You really believe you did this all on your own, that the Montgomery name had nothing to do with your success? Sign the papers, Sarah. Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." I picked up the document, examining it with deliberate slowness, before tearing it in half. The sound of ripping paper echoed through the study like a gunshot.
"No."
What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Marcus's face contorted with rage, his hand rising and falling in one fluid motion. The force of his slap sent me stumbling backward, the torn papers floating to the ground like fallen leaves. The sharp sting of the blow was nothing compared to the cold realization that none of them, not my husband, not his parents, not his brother, showed any sign of shock or disapproval at his action. "You ungrateful," he spat, his voice trembling with barely contained fury. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? By destroying the family?" I straightened slowly, tasting blood where my lip had split. The room had gone deadly quiet, the only sound the gentle ticking of the antique grandfather clock in the corner. In that moment, looking at these people who had claimed to be my family, I felt something shift inside me, a fundamental change in the way I viewed not just them, but myself. "Thank you," I said softly, touching my fingertips to my bleeding lip. "What?" Marcus looked confused, his anger momentarily derailed by my unexpected response. "Thank you for finally showing me exactly who you are, all of you." I turned to face each of them in turn. "You've made what comes next so much easier." With that, I walked to the door, Eleanor stepping aside almost involuntarily as I reached for the handle. Richard's voice stopped me. "If you walk out that door, you're walking away from everything. The family, the connections, all of it. You'll have nothing." I smiled, though they couldn't see it with my back turned. "No, Richard, I'll have everything that matters. And you'll never see it coming." The autumn air hit my face like a slap as I emerged from the study, the gentle music and laughter from the gathering now seeming grotesque in its artificiality. My heels clicked against the marble flooring, each step echoing with a finality that felt appropriate for the moment. Everything had changed, yet the party continued as if nothing had happened. Crystal glasses clinked, fake laughter tinkled, and the orchestra played on. I could feel the eyes following me, the curious glances, the whispered conversations. News traveled fast in the Montgomery circle, and I had no doubt that within minutes everyone would know what had transpired in Richard's study. Claire, ever the opportunist, was already on her phone, no doubt spreading the word with carefully crafted dramatic flair. As I reached the grand staircase, I heard Marcus's voice behind me, loud enough to ensure an audience. "Sarah, don't be dramatic. Come back here, and let's discuss this like adults." I turned slowly, aware that the music had quieted and conversations had hushed. The split in my lip had stopped bleeding, but I could feel it swelling. Marcus stood at the top of the stairs, flanked by his parents and brother, the perfect picture of family unity. Behind them, guests pretended not to watch while drinking in every detail. "Like adults," I repeated, my voice carrying clearly through the now silent room. Was it adult-like to try to steal my company? Or perhaps you mean the adult-like way you hit me when I refused to sign it over? A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Eleanor stepped forward, her social training kicking in to manage the situation. "Sarah, dear, you're obviously upset. These family matters are better discussed in private." "Family matters?" I laughed, sharp and bitter. "Let's talk about family, Eleanor. Let's discuss how your son married me, believing he could eventually take control of any success I might achieve. Or how about we discuss the fact that Montgomery Holdings is failing, and instead of admitting defeat, you thought you could simply take what I built." Richard's face had turned an interesting shade of purple. "That's enough," he thundered. "You're right, Richard. It is enough." I removed my wedding ring, letting it bounce down the marble stairs, punctuating my words. I've had enough of the manipulation, the lies, and the thinly veiled contempt. You all thought I was nothing without the Montgomery name, watch me. As I walked toward the front door, Eleanor's sharp voice followed me. "If you leave now, don't expect to ever be welcomed back. The Montgomery family doesn't forgive betrayal." I paused at the door handle. "Betrayal? How interesting you see it that way. But then, people used to taking rarely understand when someone refuses." I pushed open the heavy oak door, letting the cool night air rush in. "Oh, and Eleanor? I'd start looking for a good crisis management team. You're going to need one." Heels and walked to the window, staring out at the city that had been my home for the past 15 years. Somewhere out there, the Montgomery family was already working to destroy everything I'd built. My phone lay at the bottom of their fountain, but I knew what would be happening. Marcus would be calling emergency board meetings, contacting our major clients, spinning a story about my emotional instability and reckless business decisions. Richard would be activating his network of business contacts, ensuring that doors would close before I could even reach for their handles. Eleanor would be handling the social fallout, hosting intimate dinners where she'd sadly explain how I'd lost my way and how the family had tried everything to help. I pulled my laptop from my purse. Thankfully, I'd started carrying it everywhere since noticing Marcus's strange behavior weeks ago. Opening it, I began to type, my fingers flying across the keyboard as I documented everything that had happened in Richard's study. Every word, every threat, every moment leading up to Marcus's violence. When I finished, I sent the account to my private email server, one that Marcus didn't know existed. Next, I logged into TechVision's secure system. As expected, multiple login attempts had already been made from Marcus's IP address. He never bothered to learn the technical side of my business, always dismissing it as beneath him. Now, that arrogance would cost him. I quickly initiated the emergency protocols I'd built into the system years ago, not out of suspicion, but out of the same meticulous attention to detail that had helped me build TechVision in the first place. Within minutes, all critical data was backed up to secure servers, access codes were changed, and key employees were notified of an emergency protocol activation. A separate email went out to my most trusted team members, people I'd hired myself whose loyalty was to the company rather than the Montgomery name. The sun was rising by the time I finished, casting long shadows across the hotel room. My body ached from tension, and my mind raced with all the things I still needed to do. But beneath the exhaustion and pain, something else was building, a cold, clear certainty about what came next. I ordered room service, coffee, and a light breakfast I couldn't taste, and opened my laptop again. This time, I navigated to a folder I'd created months ago when I first noticed the signs of trouble in Marcus's behavior. Inside were carefully documented records, suspicious transfers from Montgomery Holdings, attempted access to TechVision's proprietary information, emails and meeting notes that painted a clear picture of premeditation. I hadn't known exactly what they were planning, but I'd known something was coming. The Montgomerys had taught me well, perhaps too well, about the importance of always being prepared for betrayal. They just never expected me to apply those lessons to them. My phone had automated every critical notification to my laptop, so I watched as the messages rolled in. Marcus had indeed called an emergency board meeting for 9 a.m. Richard was already reaching out to our major investors. Eleanor had begun her social media campaign, posting a cryptic message about keeping the family in her prayers during this difficult time. But they had underestimated two critical factors. First, TechVision's success wasn't built on the Montgomery name. It was built on revolutionary healthcare technology that our clients couldn't easily replace. Second, I had spent years building relationships with our partners based on trust and results, not social connections and old money. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. For a moment, my heart raced. Had they found me already? But it was just the hotel manager, personally delivering a package that had been sent to my attention. Inside was a burner phone and a business card from Diana Chen, one of Silicon Valley's most ruthless corporate lawyers. A handwritten note accompanied it. I've been waiting for your call. Time to show them what real power looks like. I smiled, remembering the lunch Diana and I had shared 6 months ago when she'd warned me about rumors of Montgomery Holdings' financial troubles. She'd seen through the family's facade then, recognizing in me a kindred spirit, someone else who'd built something real in a world of smoke and mirrors. Picking up the burner phone, I dialed her number. She answered on the first ring. They finally showed their hand? She asked without preamble. Yes. And you're ready to fight back? I touched my split lip, feeling the swelling that would serve as a reminder of this night for days to come. They tried to take everything from me, Diana. Now I'm going to show them exactly what that feels like. Good, she replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Let's get to work. The next 48 hours unfolded like a high-stakes chess match. I moved into a suite at the Four Seasons competitor hotel, knowing the Montgomerys would eventually think to check their preferred establishments. Diana had arranged for a team of private security professionals to sweep my new temporary residence for surveillance devices and establish secure communications protocols. The morning after the confrontation, I watched the business news coverage from my laptop. As expected, Montgomery Holdings had issued a press release expressing deep concern about the leadership situation at TechVision. The financial markets responded with predictable nervousness, our stock price dipping as speculation ran wild about internal power struggles and management instability. Let them play their game, Diana advised during our morning strategy session. She sat across from me at the suite dining table, her sharp features reflected in the screen of her tablet as she reviewed documentation. They're following an outdated playbook, one that worked when business was conducted in country clubs and boardrooms. They don't understand that real power in today's world lies in innovation and actual results. She was right. While Marcus and his family were busy attempting to leverage their social connections, I was focusing on what really mattered, my core team at TechVision. The brilliant minds who had helped build our revolutionary healthcare systems had received my emergency protocols and responded exactly as I'd hoped. By noon, our chief technology officer had secured all our proprietary technology and intellectual property. Our lead developer had implemented additional security measures I designed months ago, effectively locking the Montgomerys out of our most critical systems. Holdings confidential financial reports, documents that Marcus had carelessly left accessible on our home network. Experience in running companies into the ground, you mean? Montgomery Holdings is hemorrhaging money. Their last 3 major projects have failed, and they're leveraged to the hilt. They don't want to manage TechVision. They want to strip it for assets to save their failing empire. The silence that followed was deafening. Board members exchanged glances, reality sinking in. Even Marcus's supporters couldn't argue, with the stark financial evidence before them. I moved to reject any proposed transfer of ownership. Dr. Williams, our lead independent director, finally spoke. And I suggest we issue an immediate statement of confidence in current management. The vote was unanimous. As I ended the call, Diana was already drafting the press release. This is just the first step, she reminded me. They won't give up easily. The Montgomerys have built their reputation on never losing. I touched my lip, the bruise now turning a mottled yellow-green. Then it's time they learned how it feels. I've spent 15 years studying their tactics, Diana. Now I'm going to use everything they taught me to dismantle their empire, piece by piece. And what about Marcus? She asked, looking up from her tablet. A cold smile crossed my face. He's about to learn that the woman he married isn't the woman he tried to destroy. The next week was a masterclass in corporate warfare. While the Montgomerys launched their expected attacks through traditional channels, calling in favors from old money connections, attempting to pressure board members, and spreading carefully crafted rumors about my stability, I executed a strategy they never saw coming. My first move caught them completely off guard. Instead of trying to defend against their accusations, I went public with the entire story, not through press releases or carefully edited statements, but through a digital expose that detailed the attempted hostile takeover, complete with documentation of their failing empire and, most damagingly, police photographs of my injuries from the night of the family gathering. Are you sure about this? Diana had asked when I proposed the strategy. Once you release this, there's no going back. The Montgomerys will see it as a declaration of total war. I was standing by the window of my new office, a sleek modern space in a building deliberately chosen for its distance from the Montgomerys' financial district territory. They declared war the moment Marcus raised his hand to me. I'm just changing the battlefield. The story exploded across social media and tech news outlets. The timing was perfect. Amid growing conversations about domestic violence and corporate accountability, the image of a successful female tech CEO being physically assaulted for refusing to surrender her company struck a powerful chord. The fact that it happened at a family gathering in front of witnesses who did nothing to intervene made it even more damning. Eleanor's carefully crafted narrative of family unity crumbled in the face of hard evidence. Her social media posts about praying for the family during this difficult time were met with scathing responses and calls for boycotts of Montgomery Holdings properties. The photos of my bruised face juxtaposed with documentation of the family's attempted corporate takeover painted a picture that no amount of PR spin could salvage. But I wasn't just fighting a public relations battle. While the Montgomerys scrambled to contain the PR damage, I was systematically dismantling their business empire. The financial records I discovered on our home network had revealed more than just their failing projects. They'd exposed a web of questionable dealings and potential regulatory violations. Look at this, I told Diana, pointing to a series of transactions buried in their corporate filings. They've been using shell companies to hide their losses and maintain their credit rating. Every major project they've undertaken in the last 3 years has been built on a foundation of financial manipulation. Diana's eyes narrowed as she studied the documents. This goes beyond just bad business practices. Some of these transactions could trigger serious regulatory investigations. Exactly, I replied, remembering all the times I'd sat through Montgomery family dinners listening to Richard boast about his ability to manage regulatory oversight. They've always believed their connections would protect them. Time to test that theory. I assembled a team of forensic accountants and regulatory compliance experts, people who specialized in untangling complex financial schemes. Every discovery was carefully documented and anonymously submitted to relevant authorities. The Montgomerys had spent decades building a house of cards, believing their social status would protect them from scrutiny. They never imagined that someone who knew their methods intimately would systematically expose their foundation. Marcus attempted to retaliate by reaching out to TechVision's clients, trying to convince them that the company was unstable under my leadership. His efforts backfired spectacularly when several clients forwarded his communications to me, communications that contained proprietary information he shouldn't have had access to. We can add corporate espionage to the list, Diana noted, reviewing the emails. He's getting sloppy, desperate. She was right. The Marcus I'd known would never have made such an obvious mistake. But the Marcus I'd known had been a carefully constructed facade. The real man was the one who'd shown himself in his father's study, the one who resorted to violence when he couldn't get his way. The pressure began to show in other ways. Richard canceled his annual charity gala, a first in 30 years. Eleanor was notably absent from her usual social circuit. Thomas, who'd always lived in his brother's shadow, attempted to distance himself from the growing scandal by relocating to their London office. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Claire, Marcus's cousin, who had always delighted in spreading family gossip. She reached out through an intermediary. Apparently, she had been keeping records of her own, documentation of questionable family business practices, recordings of conversations, even photographs from family events that showed a pattern of controlling behavior. Why would she help us? Diana asked suspiciously when I shared the information. Because Claire has always understood something the rest of them never did, that real power lies in information, not intimidation. I remembered how she had always been present at family meetings, seemingly absorbed in her phone, but actually observing everything. She's been waiting for someone to finally stand up to them. Claire's evidence provided the final pieces we needed. The complete picture it painted wasn't just of a failing business empire. It revealed a systematic pattern of financial manipulation, regulatory evasion, and corporate bullying that had sustained the Montgomery family's power for generations. As I reviewed the mounting evidence against them, I received an unexpected text from an unknown number. You were right. We never saw it coming. Eleanor's message confirmed what I already knew. The Montgomerys were finally realizing the true extent of their vulnerability. They had spent so long believing in their own invincibility that they'd never considered someone might know all their secrets, understand all their tactics, and have the courage to use that knowledge against them. The facade of Montgomery family power was cracking, and through those cracks, the truth was beginning to shine through. I spent 15 years watching them operate, learning their tactics, understanding their weaknesses. Diana, I turned to my lawyer. How quickly can we move on this? She was already on her phone. I can have a team analyzing the evidence within the hour. If what Thomas says is true, we can have injunctions filed by morning. I turned back to Thomas. You understand what this means? Once we use this evidence, there's no going back. The Montgomery name won't just be damaged, it will be destroyed. He stood straighter, and for the first time, I saw something in him that had never been there before: conviction. The name was destroyed the moment Marcus raised his hand to you. I'm just making sure the truth comes out before they can hurt anyone else. As Thomas left my office, I looked out over the city again. The Montgomery Empire had been built on secrets and fear, on the assumption that no one would dare to challenge them. They never understood that their greatest vulnerability wasn't their financial schemes or their social manipulations. It was their belief that loyalty could be bought and maintained through fear. I picked up my phone and dialed a familiar number. Dr. Patel, remember that healthcare initiative we discussed? The one to provide our systems to underserved communities? I think it's time we moved forward with that, and I know exactly which Montgomery properties we can repurpose for the clinics. The dismantling of their empire wouldn't just be about destruction, it would be about transformation. Everything they had built through intimidation and manipulation would be reformed into something actually beneficial to society. It was a kind of poetic justice that would have made Eleanor's perfectly maintained smile crack. The evidence Thomas provided proved more devastating than even I had anticipated. Within days of our legal team submitting the documentation to regulatory authorities, the full scope of Montgomery Holdings' deception began to emerge. The carefully constructed image of old money respectability crumbled as investigators uncovered layer after layer of financial manipulation. The pension fund situation is worse than we thought, Diana reported during our morning briefing. She spread documents across my desk, each page revealing new depths of corruption. They didn't just borrow against the funds. They've been systematically replacing real assets with worthless paper for years. Thousands of employees' retirement savings are essentially gone. I felt a cold anger settle in my chest. Can we trace where the money went? That's the interesting part. Diana pulled up a complex diagram on her tablet. Most of it was funneled through a series of offshore accounts, but the final destination appears to be personal accounts belonging to Marcus and Richard. They weren't just trying to save the company, they were preparing their own golden parachutes. The revelation shouldn't have surprised me, but somehow it still did. Even after everything, some part of me hadn't wanted to believe they would steal from their own employees, people who had served the family loyally for decades. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Montgomery Holdings stock suspended amid fraud investigation. The headline was accompanied by a photo of Richard being escorted from their corporate headquarters by federal agents, his face ashen with rage and disbelief. Eleanor stood in the background, her perfectly maintained facade finally cracking as photographers captured her moment of devastation. We need to move quickly, I told Diana, before they can hide or destroy any more evidence. And we need to do something about those pension funds. She nodded, already typing on her phone. I've got our finance team working on a proposal. If we structure it right, TechVision could potentially step in as a white knight, save the pensions, acquire key Montgomery assets at a discount, and come out looking like corporate heroes. The irony wasn't lost on me. The company they had tried to steal could end up owning the ruins of their empire. But unlike them, we would use those assets to actually help people. My assistant interrupted with an urgent message. Ms. Carter, Marcus is in the building. He somehow got past security. Should I call the police? Before I could respond, my office door burst open. Marcus stood in the doorway, his appearance a shocking contrast to the polished executive I'd been married to. His expensive suit was rumpled, his face unshaven, and his eyes held a wild look I'd never seen before. You vindictive, he snarled, taking a step forward. Are you happy now? You've destroyed everything. Diana reached for her phone, but I held up a hand to stop her. Security's already on the way, aren't they, Lisa? I asked my assistant calmly. Yes, Ms. Carter, 30 seconds out. I turned back to Marcus, noting how his hands trembled with barely suppressed rage. I destroyed nothing, Marcus. You and your family did that all by yourselves. I just exposed the truth. He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. The truth? You want to talk about truth? The truth is you were nothing before us. We gave you everything, the connections, the opportunities, the status, and this is how you pay us. No, Marcus. I stood, walking around my desk to face him directly. The truth is that you never gave me anything. Everything I built despite you, not because of you. You just couldn't stand that, could you? The idea that your wife might be more successful than you. His face contorted, and for a moment, I thought he might try to hit me again. But before he could move, security officers flooded the office. This time there were witnesses. This time there would be consequences. As they led him away, still shouting threats and accusations, I turned to Diana. Make sure that footage from my office security cameras is sent to the prosecutors and draft a restraining order, not just against Marcus, but the entire family. She nodded, but her expression was concerned. They're going to get desperate now. This kind of public humiliation, the criminal charges, the loss of status, it's everything they feared most. Good, I replied, straightening papers on my desk that Marcus's entrance had disturbed. Let them feel what it's like to lose everything. Let them experience what they've put so many others through. Please share your thoughts in the comment section below. Each of your shares is not only a motivation for us, but also contributes to spreading value to the community. If you find this content useful, don't forget to watch the whole video, like, subscribe, and share with someone you think needs to hear this too. The autumn chill surrounded the courthouse steps, crowded with reporters and photographers, all eager to capture the final chapter of the Montgomery saga. I sat in the back of the courtroom, watching as the man who had once been my husband was led in, wearing an orange jumpsuit, a far cry from his beloved Tom Ford suits. The evidence against him had been overwhelming. Between Thomas's documentation, Eleanor's revelations, and the mountain of financial records our team had uncovered, Marcus's defense had crumbled before it even began. His own father's testimony against him had been the final nail in the coffin. The defendant will rise, the judge announced, her voice cutting through the hushed courtroom. Marcus stood, his shoulders slumped, his once proud posture broken. He didn't look back at the gallery, didn't try to find me in the crowd. He knew I was there. I'd made sure of that. Marcus Montgomery, the judge began, you have been found guilty of multiple counts of securities fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, and corporate theft. The evidence presented shows not just criminal activity, but a profound breach of trust of your employees, your shareholders, and the public. I watched as the judge detailed his crimes, each one a reminder of how the mighty Montgomery empire had been built on lies and manipulation. When she finally announced the sentence, 15 years in federal prison, I felt no joy, no satisfaction. Instead, I felt a profound sense of closure. As the officers led him away, Marcus finally turned, his eyes meeting mine for a brief moment. In that look, I saw something I'd never seen before: recognition. Not of me as his wife or as his victim, but as the architect of his downfall. He finally understood that I hadn't just survived his betrayal, I had transformed it into the weapon that destroyed everything he held dear. Outside the courthouse, Diana met me at the bottom of the steps. Richard's sentencing is next week, she reminded me, and the civil suits against the family are just beginning. This could drag on for years. Let it, I replied, watching the media frenzy around Marcus's transport vehicle. Every day this stays in the news is another day other families like the Montgomerys are put on notice. Back at TechVision's headquarters, I found my team gathered in the conference room. On the screens, news coverage of the sentencing played on mute while they reviewed the latest projections for our healthcare initiatives. The Montgomery Foundation assets have been fully transferred, our CFO reported. We've already begun converting their old property into medical centers. The first clinic opens next month in what used to be their flagship hotel. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The very buildings that had once symbolized Montgomery excess and privilege were being transformed into centers of healing and hope. It was a metamorphosis that went beyond mere business. It was a statement about the kind of power that truly mattered. Miss Carter, my assistant appeared at the door. Claire Montgomery is here to see you. Claire entered the conference room, looking both out of place and oddly at home. Of all the Montgomery family members, she had emerged from the scandal relatively unscathed, largely thanks to her early cooperation with investigators. I thought you should have this, she said, placing a familiar-looking invitation on the table. They found it in Eleanor's personal effects after she passed. She never sent it out, but, well, you should read it. The invitation was to what would have been the Montgomery family's annual harvest gathering, the same event where everything had started. But Eleanor had changed the wording. Instead of the usual formal announcement, she had written a simple message. I was wrong. You won. The family deserves everything that's coming. She wrote this the day before she died, Claire explained. I think she finally understood what the family name had really come to mean. I picked up the invitation, feeling the weight of the heavy cardstock. And what about you, Claire? What do you think it means now? She smiled, a genuine expression that held none of the old Montgomery social artifice. I think it means whatever you want it to mean. You're the one who broke the cycle, Sarah. You showed that real power isn't about what you can take from others, it's about what you can build for yourself. After she left, I stood at my office window, looking out at the city that had once been the Montgomerys' playground. The landscape had changed, not just physically, with their name removed from buildings and properties, but fundamentally. Their fall had created space for new growth, new possibilities. My phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Patel. First patient scheduled for the new clinic next week. Their lives will be better because of what you built from the ashes of their empire. That night, as I left the office, I passed the wall where we displayed our company's mission statement. Below it, I'd recently added a new quote. True power lies not in what you can take from others, but in what you can create for the world. The security guard nodded as I passed, and I remembered that night at the Montgomery estate when a similar guard had hesitated to let me leave. Everything had changed since then. I had changed. The woman who had driven away from that family gathering in tears was gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and more powerful than the Montgomerys had ever imagined. Their attempt to break me had instead broken their hold over everything they thought they owned. In the end, that was the greatest victory of all. Impeccable wardrobe. Sarah, he began, his voice carrying an unfamiliar note of humility. Thank you for coming. You wanted to talk, Marcus, so talk. He sat down carefully, as if weighing each movement. I've had a lot of time to think in here about what I did, about who I was, who I became, because of my family's expectations. And what great insights have you gained? I kept my voice neutral, watching him closely. That you were right about everything. The way we did business, the way we treated people, it was all wrong. I see that now. He leaned forward, earnestness radiating from every pore. I want to make amends, to be part of the solution. I studied him for a moment, noting the subtle tells that hadn't changed, the slight tightening around his eyes when he was performing, the way his hands remained perfectly still when he was trying to convince someone of something. You know what your biggest mistake was, Marcus? I asked, interrupting his carefully prepared speech. It wasn't the fraud, or the attempted theft of my company, or even hitting me. It was believing that power only flows in one direction, from those who take to those who give. He blinked, thrown off script. I don't understand. The real power was never in the Montgomery name, or the family connections, or the social status. It was in what we could create, what we could build. You could have been part of something revolutionary, something that actually helped people. Instead, you chose to try to steal what you couldn't build yourself. That's why I'm reaching out now, he insisted. I want to be part of building something better. I stood, smoothing down my jacket. No, Marcus. You want to find a new angle, a new way to regain some measure of control. But here's what you still don't understand. I didn't succeed because I outmaneuvered you. I succeeded because I was building something genuine while you were just maintaining a facade. As I turned to leave, he called out, "The family estate. I heard you bought it. What are you going to do with it?" I paused at the door. We're turning it into a place where the next generation of business leaders will learn the difference between real power and the illusion of it. Your father's study, where you tried to force me to sign away my company, that's going to be a classroom where we teach ethics and corporate responsibility. The look on his face, a mixture of disbelief and dawning comprehension, stayed with me as I left the prison. Back in my car, Diana was waiting with updates on our latest initiatives. The first class of ethics fellows starts next month, she reported. We had over 1,000 applications for 20 spots, and the healthcare division just finalized the patent for the new patient care system. I looked out the window as we drove past the former Montgomery Holdings building, now home to a consortium of healthcare startups we were mentoring. The Montgomery name had been replaced by a simple phrase, "Build something better." You know, Diana mused, when this all started, most people thought you were just seeking revenge. They didn't understand what you were really building. Most people still think power is about what you can take from others, I replied. They don't realize that real power is about what you can create, what you can change. As we pulled up to TechVision's headquarters, I saw a group of young entrepreneurs waiting in the lobby. They were part of our mentorship program, each one working on innovations that could genuinely improve people's lives. That's the real victory, I told Diana, watching them excitedly discuss their projects. Not destroying the old way of doing business, but creating a new one. The Montgomerys tried to break me because they thought power was about control. Instead, they freed me to show the world what real power looks like. And that, in the end, was the greatest transformation of all. Rural clinics in developing countries, surgeons from leading hospitals, emergency responders who had used our systems in crisis zones, each had a story to tell about how open-source healthcare technology had transformed their ability to save lives. We didn't hold a press conference. Instead, we launched a global live stream showing real-time examples of our technology in action. In Brazil, a remote village doctor was using our platform to consult with specialists in Sao Paulo. In Kenya, a mobile clinic was delivering specialized care using our diagnostic tools. In New York, a team of surgeons was performing a groundbreaking operation guided by our surgical assistance system. This is what excellence looks like, I told the cameras when I finally appeared on the stream, not in boardrooms or legislative proposals, but in lives saved and communities served. But Heritage wasn't finished. They launched a series of attack ads featuring paid testimonials from former Montgomery associates, claiming that our success was built on stolen ideas and technology. It was a desperate move, but one that required a response. I chose to deliver that response from an unexpected location, the prison where Marcus was serving his sentence. You want to talk about stolen ideas? I addressed the cameras, standing in the same visiting room where Marcus had tried to convince me of his reformation. Let me tell you about real theft. Real theft is when you try to take someone's life's work through intimidation and violence. Real theft is when you attempt to maintain power by denying others the chance to innovate and grow. The cameras followed me as I walked through the prison corridors. This is where attempts to control and restrict innovation lead. But out there, I gestured beyond the prison walls. Out there we're building something different. Something that can't be stolen or controlled because it belongs to everyone who wants to make healthcare better. The impact was immediate. Heritage's stock price plummeted as investors recognized the futility of fighting against the future. Their legislative proposals were met with a flood of opposition from medical professionals worldwide. Even their premium hospital partners began to waver as patients demanded access to the more advanced open-source systems. But the most significant response came from an unexpected source. Young members of the very families that had backed Heritage began to break ranks. They saw the writing on the wall. The old way of doing business was dying, and they wanted to be part of what came next. Miss Carter, my assistant, interrupted my thoughts. The first group of Heritage developers has arrived. They're requesting to join our open community. I smiled, remembering how the Montgomerys had always feared losing control. They never understood that true power comes from letting go, from creating something bigger than yourself, and allowing it to grow beyond your control. Show them to the collaboration space, I instructed, and make sure they understand. Here we don't just write code, we write the future. Looking out from my office at the city skyline, I could see the Heritage Tower standing like a monument to the old way of thinking. But all around it, hospitals were using our systems to save lives. Clinics were expanding their capabilities through our platform, and developers worldwide were contributing to a healthcare revolution that couldn't be stopped by any amount of money or influence. The Montgomerys had tried to break me by taking away what they thought was my source of power. Instead, they had forced me to discover a different kind of power altogether, the power of creating something that could change the world. 5 years had passed since that rainy night when Marcus had slapped me at the family gathering. The world of corporate power had shifted so dramatically that it was almost unrecognizable. The Heritage Tower, once a symbol of resistance to change, now housed a collaborative innovation center where traditional healthcare companies worked alongside tech startups to create new solutions. I was reviewing plans for our newest global initiative when Diana burst into my office, her typically composed demeanor shaken. "You need to see this," she said, handing me her tablet. "Marcus is being released early. Good behavior and cooperation with ongoing investigations." The news shouldn't have affected me. I'd moved so far beyond the Montgomerys that they felt like characters from someone else's story, yet something about this development stirred my curiosity. "There's more," Diana continued. "He's written a book, The Fall of an Empire, a Montgomery story. It's being published next month." I scrolled through the pre-release details. Marcus was positioning himself as a reformed man, claiming to have seen the error of the old ways during his time in prison. He was promising to reveal the true story of how the Montgomery Empire fell and how it led to a revolution in corporate America. "Should we try to stop the publication?" Diana asked, already thinking like a lawyer. "No," I replied, setting down the tablet. "Let him tell his story. We'll let our work speak for itself." That evening, as I walked through what had once been the Montgomery estate, now bustling with young entrepreneurs and healthcare innovators, I received an unexpected message from Claire. "He wants to do the book launch here at the estate. Says it would be poetic justice to tell his story of transformation in the place where it all began." The request was audacious, exactly the kind of dramatic gesture the old Marcus would have orchestrated, but something about it felt different this time. "Set it up," I told Claire, "but on our terms." The launch event was scheduled for exactly 5 years to the day after the family gathering that had changed everything. As the date approached, our team transformed the estate's grand hall, where I had once been humiliated, into a showcase of everything we'd achieved since then. The walls displayed real-time data from hospitals worldwide using our systems. Screens showed testimonials from patients whose lives had been saved by our technology. One entire section was dedicated to the young innovators we'd supported. Their success stories a testament to what could be achieved when power was used to elevate others rather than control them. Fear of a world where power couldn't be hoarded. "Ms. Carter," my assistant interrupted, "Dr. Zhang and the team are ready for the private briefing before your keynote." The meeting room overlooked Singapore's ultra-modern skyline, a fitting backdrop for discussions about the future of healthcare. Dr. Zhang didn't waste time with pleasantries. "The alliance isn't just targeting your business model," she warned. "They're lobbying for international regulations that would effectively lock out open-source medical technology in developing regions. They're claiming it's about safety, but it's about maintaining their monopoly on healthcare access," I finished. "They want to force developing nations to depend on their proprietary systems." The implications were staggering. While we had been focusing on innovation and accessibility, they had been building a framework to control global healthcare delivery. It was the Montgomery playbook scaled up to international proportions. But they had made the same fundamental mistake, assuming that power came from control rather than creation. "Show me the latest data from our global initiative," I requested. The screens came alive with real-time information from our healthcare networks worldwide. Remote clinics in rural India conducting telemedicine consultations with specialists, mobile medical units in Africa using our diagnostic tools, emergency response teams in South America coordinating disaster relief. "This is what they're really afraid of," I told the assembled team. "Not just the technology, but the proof that healthcare innovation doesn't need to be controlled by a privileged few." The keynote speech would be crucial. The world's medical community was watching, and the alliance had already begun their campaign of fear and doubt. But I had learned long ago that the best response to fear was hope, backed by undeniable results. As I took the stage, the massive screens behind me displayed not corporate logos or marketing slogans, but live feeds from hospitals and clinics using our open-source systems. Each feed told a story of lives saved, communities served, and barriers broken. "They tell us that healthcare innovation must be controlled to be safe," I began, my voice carrying across the packed auditorium, "that only traditional power structures can ensure quality, that the old ways are the best ways." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. "But I'm here to show you something different." With a gesture, I brought up new data. Comparative studies showing how open-source healthcare technology had improved patient outcomes across every metric: cost reductions, increased access, faster innovation cycles, but most importantly, lives saved in places the traditional system had never reached. "The choice before us isn't between old and new, traditional and modern," I continued. "It's between a healthcare system that serves the few and one that serves everyone. between innovation that's controlled and innovation that's shared. As I spoke, news alerts began flooding phones throughout the audience. The alliance's carefully orchestrated launch was being overshadowed by announcements from their own member organizations. Young leaders within the old money families were breaking ranks, pledging to join our open source initiative. Diana's tablet lit up with message after message, developers, doctors, and healthcare administrators worldwide declaring their support for accessible medical technology. The alliance's attempt to resurrect the old power structure was crumbling before it could even fully form. After the keynote, I received an unexpected message from Marcus, still working to make amends for his past. They tried to recruit me for the alliance, offered to restore the Montgomery name. I told them they were fighting yesterday's battle. As I gazed over Singapore's skyline, I reflected on how far we had come since that rainy night at the Montgomery estate. The slap meant to remind me of my place had instead sparked a revolution. The alliance is falling apart, Diana said, joining me. Investors are pulling out. No one wants to be on the wrong side of history. It's not about sides, I corrected. Real power grows by being shared. The fallout from the Singapore summit rocked the global healthcare industry. Within weeks, 3 European pharmaceutical companies transitioned to open-source platforms, and Asian hospital networks adopted our collaborative care systems. But success made me cautious. Diana's concern grew when our data showed unusual activity. Someone's probing our systems, she said, revealing sophisticated tests from multiple locations worldwide. The probe wasn't from the Alliance, but from a network of small tech companies recently acquired by Phoenix Global Innovations, based in Dubai. The board members included the next generation of the powerful elite, trying to co-opt our model and keep control in a few hands. I was invited to meet their CEO, Catherine Rothschild-Chen, at her private island in Thailand. Diana warned it was likely a trap to undermine us, so I suggested we meet at our clinic in rural Thailand instead. Catherine left visibly shaken after witnessing real healthcare in action, and Phoenix soon announced a restructuring, abandoning their takeover attempt. However, some young board members reached out, eager to learn from our approach. They'll try again, Diana said. Someone will always want control. Let them try, I replied, watching another successful surgery. The world has seen the power of accessible healthcare technology. There's no going back. Then, on the 7th anniversary of that fateful gathering, Elon's will revealed shocking truths. Her letter detailed how the Montgomery empire was built on stolen innovations, including my father's company, which they had destroyed years ago. That's why they chose you, Diana said. They thought the daughter of a man they destroyed would be grateful for their acceptance. I finished. They never imagined I'd build something they couldn't take. Elon's letter contained not just a confession but also information on how the Montgomerys and others had crushed competitors for generations. Now, the question was what to do with this knowledge. Diana suggested we could expose them all, use the documents to bring down more than just the Montgomery legacy. Before I could reply, my assistant urgently informed me about a healthcare crisis in Southeast Asia. A virus was spreading rapidly, overwhelming hospitals, and our systems were being blocked by powerful families named in Eleanor's files. They're using a healthcare crisis to keep control, Thomas said angrily. People are dying because of their power games. It became clear this was about more than business, it was about life and death. The old system was costing lives by restricting access to vital technology. I decided to act. Upload everything. I ordered. All the evidence of suppressed innovation and lives lost because healthcare is treated as a privilege, not a right. Diana hesitated. Are you sure? Some of these families are still powerful. That's exactly why it needs to be done, I replied. Let's show the world how they've kept their power and at what cost. We launched the Transparency Initiative, releasing all documents and records, while also sharing our healthcare technology freely. The impact was huge. Hospitals worldwide adopted our systems, defying the pressure from the old guard, and innovations spread rapidly. At home, my father called, emotional after seeing the news. I always wondered why others succeeded when I couldn't get a permit approved. But look at what came of it. Would you have built what you did if they'd let you? His words hit me hard. The Montgomerys had tried to break both my father and me, but in the end, they had created something stronger than they'd destroyed. In prison, Marcus sent a message. "I finally get what you meant about power. It's not taken. It multiplies when shared." The virus crisis eventually ended, thanks to our open platforms, but the true change had just begun. The exposure of restricted innovations sparked a global discussion about healthcare access. Diana remarked, "It's not just about healthcare anymore. You've changed how people view power." Looking at the data, lives saved, barriers broken, I reflected on Elon's letter. The Montgomerys thought power was taking what others built. But real power is creating something no one can take because it belongs to everyone. As the 10th anniversary of my break with the Montgomerys arrived, I received an invitation to a global summit on medical innovation at their transformed estate, now a hub for collaborative healthcare. The space where Marcus had once tried to steal my company was now hosting a celebration of shared innovation. Diana showed me breaking news. The last major healthcare conglomerate had adopted open-source platforms, signaling the death of the old system. The second story caught my eye. Marcus was being released from prison and already working on healthcare initiatives in underserved communities. "He's requested to attend the summit," Diana said, clarifying that he wanted to observe, not speak. "He says he wants to learn, not promote himself." The old Sarah might have refused out of spite, but the woman I'd become knew that growth often meant closing tough chapters. Accept his request, I decided, but have security monitor him discreetly. The summit opened with Dr. Jung showing how democratized healthcare technology had saved millions over the past decade, emphasizing a shift in innovation from ownership to collaboration. During a break, I found myself in what had once been Richard's study, now transformed into an open, collaborative workspace. "Quite a change," a voice said. It was Marcus, older and wiser, not the entitled man I remembered. "Why did you come?" I asked. He stepped in, watching the data display. "Because I needed to see what you understood. We never did. Power isn't held, it's set free." Before I could reply, urgent messages came in about a massive earthquake in Nepal. As our global network responded seamlessly, Marcus quietly observed, "This is real power." The summit then became a live demonstration of our vision, global collaboration using shared technology to save lives. Later, I received a message from Catherine Rothschild Chen, acknowledging the power of creation over control and offering her resources for relief efforts. As the summit closed, I reflected on the Montgomerys' attempt to break me. Instead, they had sparked a revolution. "Dr. Patel's looking for you," Diana said, joining me. "The Rural India program has exceeded expectations." The success was more than just using our system. It was about others improving upon it. I smiled, realizing the real victory was creating space for others to innovate. Looking at the estate, now transformed into a hub of collaboration, I could barely recognize the mansion that once symbolized control. Marcus came by before leaving. "I understand now," he said. "Thank you for showing me." A year later, I received a request from a business school to create a case study on healthcare innovation using the Montgomery story. Alexandra, Claire's daughter, led the project, seeking to explore the human elements of change. Her research showed how the pursuit of control often led to downfall, a pattern she found across generations. "It wasn't just the Montgomery," she said. "It was everywhere." Her words resonated deeply with me. The next generation wasn't just adopting new business models, they were reimagining success. Diana brought surprising news that strengthened Alexandra's research. Former executives from Phoenix Global Innovations had formed a coalition, not to control healthcare technology, but to ensure it remained open and accessible. They called it the Innovation Commons, and used their resources to support open-source healthcare development. This generational shift became clear during a global health crisis when the pandemic threatened to overwhelm medical systems. Instead of competing for control, there was unprecedented collaboration. Young leaders, once raised in a system of control, now championed open innovation. The Montgomery estate, once a symbol of exclusion, became the hub for a global response. Alexandra remarked, "A decade ago, these families would have tried to consolidate power. Now, they're demonstrating the strength of collaboration. The success of the pandemic response validated everything we'd built, but a personal moment sealed the change. Marcus's son, once a teenager during our confrontation, arrived with a new open-source diagnostic tool he had developed. "I learned from both of you," he said. "Real legacy isn't about what you keep, but what you give." The Montgomery name, once associated with control, had transformed into a symbol of collaborative innovation. Young innovators now worked at the estate, and Diana reported that the last restrictive healthcare patents were being released into the public domain. The transformation was complete. "It's a different world," Alexandra said. "It started here when you refused to submit to their version of power." As I stood in the garden, watching young developers work, I received a message. The last healthcare patents were now public. "The real victory," I told Alexandra, "is in showing future generations a better way to build the future." 15 years after that fateful gathering, our collaborative model had become the blueprint for the Global Health Equity Initiative. The initiative ensured that medical innovations would be part of humanity's shared knowledge. During the announcement at the Global Innovation Center, Richard Montgomery, now released from prison, attended as an observer, sitting beside his grandson, James. The contrast between the generations was striking. Richard, once a patriarch of power, now quietly observed as James presented data showing how open-source innovation had revolutionized healthcare. Richard acknowledged, "I didn't understand it then, but I think I'm starting to now." Moments later, a massive earthquake struck Central Asia. But instead of panic, our global network coordinated responses. Medical professionals collaborated in real time, proving that true power lies in setting innovation free to help those in need. Richard's expression changed as he watched the data flow. "We thought we were building something permanent by controlling it," he said, "but this is actually permanent because it can't be controlled or taken away." The crisis response showcased everything we'd worked for. Teams once in competition now collaborated, and innovations once locked behind patents were being shared. The system now valued impact over control. Later, I received a surprising message. Elon's old social circle had turned their charity gala into a funding initiative for global healthcare innovation. Those who once mocked me were now supporting accessible medical tech. "You've changed how a generation thinks about power and success," Diana remarked. She was right. The transformation went beyond business and shifted cultural values. The next generation now measured success by contribution, not control. Looking out over the city, I saw how much had changed. The Montgomery estate was now an innovation hub. The Heritage Tower housed research teams, and old social clubs had become healthcare centers. My assistant interrupted with a request from the UN's Secretary General to expand the Global Health Equity Initiative to include AI development. The model of collaboration was now spreading across sectors. Richard, watching it all, said, "We thought power was making others depend on us. But real power is creating something that makes dependency obsolete." His words captured the change. The Montgomery had taught me about power through fear, but they had unwittingly helped create a power that grew stronger as it was shared. As the UN session ended, I watched James lead a team of innovators working to help earthquake victims. The next generation wasn't asking about ownership and control. They were asking how to make things better for everyone. Please share your thoughts in the comment section below. Each of your shares is not only a motivation for us, but also contributes to spreading value to the community. If you find this content useful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with someone you think needs to hear this too.